we want to be able to communicate better. We have so much problem in the workplace with conflict, with
Right.
low engagement. In the United States, the lack of engagement, we lose 500 billion a year, according to Gallup. Okay, now all those people, if we can get them to be more empathetic, we can get them to ask more questions and seek out different jobs that maybe are more aligned to what they would like, and understand why a certain thing is a certain way, and all these things all tie back to curiosity. That we can really improve turnover, we can improve conflict, we can improve communication, we can improve all these issues.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. This is your host Neha at peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view, integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that's specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and channel that receives more than 200,000 visitors a year, and we also publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome today Dr. Diane Hamilton, who's the founder and CEO of Tonera and co-founder of Dianes Innovations, which are consulting and media-based businesses. She's a nationally syndicated radio host, keynote speaker, and the former MBA program chair at the Forbes School of Business. She has authored multiple books which are required in universities around the world. She is the creator of the famously known Curiosity Code Index assessment, which is the first and only assessment that determines the factors that inhibit curiosity. Her work in the area of curiosity has been groundbreaking, and it has helped several organizations improve innovation, engagement, and productivity. Thinkers 50 Radar shows her as one of the top minds in management and leadership. Her work has been endorsed by some of the most respected names in leadership, namely Steve Forbes, Ken Fisher, Doug Conant, and Jeff Hoffman. She is a highly sought-after keynote speaker who has shared the stage with top speakers, including Marshall Goldsmith and Martha Stewart. She has been featured on several channels, some of them being Forbes, First for Women, Investopedia, SHRM, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox. So, Dr. Diane, I consider myself very privileged to speak to you tonight on behalf of peopleHum.
Well, thank you. That sounds like a lot when you say it all in one spot, but it's really nice to be here, and I'm excited to chat with you.
Me too. So the first question that I want to ask you is, what's it like being a nationally syndicated radio host? And what sides of yourself did you unravel through that process?
It's such an interesting thing I just fell into. I had no intention of having a radio show. When I was the MBA program chair at Forbes, as you mentioned, at the Forbes School of Business, I had interviewed several people as just part of our speaker program, and I thought it was really fun. Actually, the very first person I got to interview was Ken Fisher, the billionaire behind Fisher Investments. And so when I jump in big. I had this really great experience with a super intelligent, very successful guy. And I really loved it. And I thought, well, that was something I just kind of thought was a one experience. And then when I left, I went back to speaking and consulting in my company at Tonera. And as I was interviewed for my work with my past books and different things I had done, the first guy who had interviewed me at that point had a nationally syndicated radio show. And I thought, well, this was kind of fun. I asked him about it, and he said he could get me a spot there if I wanted it, but I had to start in 2 weeks. And so I had to create the entire show from all the videos, all the ads, every single thing, have all the guests, everything in the bank in 2 weeks. And you know how much fun it is to do a show. It's challenging, right? You have a lot of things. And, I interviewed a lot of Forbes 30 under 30s because I knew them from working at the school. And it was really fun to just get all these really young and old and diverse individuals on the show. And everybody was super interesting that I thought, well, I'll just do this for a while, but more than 1,000 people have been on my show now. And I had Steve Forbes, and I've had a lot of other billionaires. There's Craigslist is a big, Craig from Craig Newmark has been on my show. Keith Kroc, the billionaire behind DocuSign, had a lot of people like that. Had a lot of Hall of Fame speakers, and you mentioned Marshall Goldsmith. Some of those kind of people have been on my show, and it's just really fun to get to learn and hear all these different insights from some of the most amazing minds of our time. So I love it, and I continue to do that. But it's kind of in addition to everything else I do, which, running my companies and all the things that you mentioned.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can imagine how fascinating that must be. Just finding yourself somewhere and then realizing that you actually love doing this. That must be a great experience.
It is, sometimes you run into things, you just stumble into these different opportunities. Yeah. And I think it's part of what I deal with in terms of curiosity is not shutting down opportunities and opening up your mind to, that would be interesting, and just kind of explore that a little bit more. What could that be? And just to just have that openness to experience. And I think it's a really critical thing, because a lot of people would just go, oh, that sounds hard, I don't know if I want to try it, and they just give up. And I'm trying to get, so people don't do that. I want them to just try things,
Right. So I'm very thrilled to learn about the Curiosity Code Index assessment, the first and only assessment that determines the factors that inhibit curiosity. I consider myself very privileged to be asking you this in this moment right now. How did you come to create this assessment, which is indeed a groundbreaking revolution in the world of management and leadership?
Well, thank you for that. I started to write a book on curiosity after interviewing so many great people on my show. As I mentioned, they were all super successful. And I thought, wow, what is making these people so different? And a lot of it came back to they were super curious. And I still teach for a number of universities part-time and I just, meet so many people, and a lot of them are more curious and some of them aren't so curious. And I thought, well, I'm going to write a book about curiosity and just discuss this. But as I started to write the book, I started to recognize that it wasn't enough just to write about curiosity. I wanted to find out how to help people who weren't curious or enough, weren't really super curious, to become more curious. And I started to look at different assessments. And because I had written my doctoral dissertation on emotional intelligence, I had a background on assessments. And I had written a book actually with my daughter many years ago about a bunch of different assessments, like Myers-Briggs and DISC and all the different popular assessments. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to check to see what kind of research is out there on their assessments for curiosity. And what surprised me was all the assessments would tell you is if you're curious or not, which is fine. You could have a high level, low level, and that's good to know for certain things.
Right.
But then what if you're low? Then what do you do? There wasn't anything that told me what was stopping that curiosity. And I'm thinking, well, I want to know what's the problem so I can fix it, right? So I hired a lot of people from Harvard or, big universities here who were really smart to be psychometric statisticians to help me learn to write the different questions to determine these things. But it was interesting to me that they kept coming back with assessments that told you if you're curious or not. And I said, well, that's already kind of been done, right? I don't want that. That's great. We need those, but that's not what I want to do. Something different, because we want to find out this other thing. So I spent years and I studied through, I started in LinkedIn just talking to people about it. Then I eventually went out and did research and surveys and did the psychometric information myself through factor analysis, which is a lot of fun, statistics, and did all of that to analyze the data. And what I found is after years of research, I found there were 4 things that inhibit curiosity. And I thought, this is really interesting to see how they kind of, factored together these different areas of what stops us. And so that's really what led to the Curiosity Code Index, which now is part of the whole, in addition to the book, I work with companies to give them this index. It's also part of an app that they're creating as part of Reid Hoffman, the guy who created LinkedIn. He's backing this company, Flourish, and in that company, they have an app called You, and it's going to be in that. I'm working with large companies like Verizon and Novartis worldwide to give assessments to or to do different kinds of training and different things and videos and different things associated with curiosity. And so it's really taking up a space that no one had gone into. So that was why I was really honored to have Thinkers 50 recognize my work, because I went there to London last November with all these great minds. I mean, the Amy Edmondsons from Harvard, and just everybody you could think of. Marshall Goldsmith was there, and all of the people who you think, wow, these people have really done some amazing work. So I was very honored that my assessment was part of that.
Absolutely. That is so fascinating. And I'm so glad that you shared that with us. Could you tell us a bit about Tonera, your consulting business, as well as Daima Innovations, your media-based business?
Well, I'd be happy to. And it ties into what we were just talking about.
Right.
Tonera is based on my work as a speaker and an author and a consultant and everything I do with this Curiosity Code Index. So what I do at Tonera is I work with these companies and give them Curiosity Code Index assessment. And I want to tell you what the 4 factors were, because I didn't touch on that. If I left everybody curious, that's good. There's 4 factors that inhibit curiosity, and they're fear, assumptions, technology, and environment. So FATE, F-A-T-E, would help you remember it. But fear is, the fear that you're going to look stupid and be unprepared, all those kinds of things. Assumptions are the things you tell yourself. I'm not going to be interested. It was bad in the past when I tried it, those kinds of things. Technology is over and underutilization of it. And environment is just the impact our friends, our family, and everything that everybody we've ever known have had. Right. So I go and I train people as part of Tonera to do that. But I also speak. Now I give keynotes around the world for different topics. Usually right now a lot of it's about curiosity, but some of it will be about perception, which is my perception work I do with Daima Innovations with my co-author, Dr. Maya Zelahich, who she ended up being the MBA program chair after I left at the Forbes School of Business. So we worked together and we wrote a book called The Power of Perception, which will be out in the next few months. Wow. And we created a Perception Power Index, and both of those index, the Power Perception Index and the Curiosity Code Index, are available on my site. And that's the kind of things that we do. We do training and development within those companies. So
right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So the next question that I want to ask you is that sometimes some very seasoned leaders also fail at emotional intelligence. So what do you think is the key towards being empathetic towards employees and at the same time driving them towards that objective?
Well, as I mentioned, I wrote my dissertation on emotional intelligence. It's such a huge topic. I was fortunate to have Daniel Goleman on my show, which I'm sure you're aware. Daniel Goleman made emotional intelligence a very hot topic. There's other researchers out there, but he made it very mainstream. I loved his book about why EQ can matter more than IQ. And I think that there's a lot of research by a lot of other people like Travis Bradbury and others who have shown that leaders, CEOs specifically, might have lower levels of emotional intelligence. And a lot of this, we're not sure, how much of this is due to getting out of touch because you've made it to the top and everybody around you is having limited conversations or they're agreeing with you because you're at the top, right? We have to develop this sense of empathy, and empathy comes into play in a lot of things in emotional intelligence in general in my studies in curiosity and perception, which is interesting because empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and have that sense of what they're experiencing, right? From their perspective. And when you do it, you're asking people questions to be able to get that experience. You have to have that curiosity to want to know what this person's experiencing. How is it from their perspective and their perception? So it ties into perception as well. When I wrote about perception, I saw it as a combination of EQ, emotional quotient, which is the measurement of your emotional intelligence, IQ, and CQ for curiosity quotient, and CQ for cultural quotient, because all of these factors, they come into play to impact our perception, to impact how we see things. And we don't have to agree with other people to empathize with them, right?
Absolutely.
You just have to understand where they're coming from to go, okay, you have a valid point based on your perception. And that's why it's so important for people to develop their sense of curiosity, to develop the sense of empathy, because if you can get empathy, that helps with the interpersonal skills, which is a big part of emotional intelligence as well. Because emotional intelligence is really about understanding your own emotions and understanding those in others. And when you get that understanding of what other people are feeling and what you're feeling, you're able to communicate better. We want to be able to communicate better. We have so much problem in the workplace with conflict, with
Right.
low engagement. In the United States, the lack of engagement, we lose 500 billion a year, according to Gallup. Okay. Now, all those people, if we can get them to be more empathetic, we could get them to ask more questions and seek out different jobs that maybe are more aligned to what they would like, and understand why a certain thing is a certain way. And all these things all tie back to curiosity, that we can really improve turnover, we can improve conflict, we can improve communication, we can improve all these issues. So developing emotional intelligence and question asking and empathy, all the things you're talking about are critical.
Absolutely. I love how when you say emotional intelligence, at one point it just seems like, that's all that's needed. But then when you start to talk about it, the way that you spoke about it just now, your research shows that there are many levels into this, and that your research is really deep rooted. So that's absolutely fascinating. Moving on to the last question today. So I'm sure, Dr. Diane, that while watching this video and listening to this podcast episode, a lot of our audience members must be awestruck and thoroughly inspired to reach for similar dreams. So what would you like to tell them?
Well, I think that a lot of people get stuck in the status quo, and I want to get people out of status quo thinking. There was a research study where they took a hidden camera and watched a woman go into what she thought was an eye doctor's appointment. And the National Geographic has posted this. You might have seen it. But it's a really interesting thought experiment about how we go along with status quo thinking. So she went into a doctor's office, and everybody around her were actors. She didn't know this. And every few minutes, a bell would ring. And as the bell would ring, everybody would stand up and sit down with no explanation. And she watched everybody do this, but she didn't know why. And only after 3 times having the bell ring, she got up and sat down with them. Because we go along with what other people do, right? We all go along with status quo behavior. It's called social learning, and it feels comfortable. And the problem is that we're not asking why. We just do things. And in companies, when you do that, you go along with the way things have always been, you end up with the same old thing, and then you'll be passed by. Innovation will pass you by. And so they actually took everybody out of the waiting room to see how she would respond by herself. So they called people back one at a time as if they were getting their eyes examined. And then when the bell rang, she still stood up and down when no one was around. And when they added actual patients later to see what they would do, they all started to stand up and sit down too. So the thing is, we have to recognize status quo behaviors that we do. Why are we doing it this way? How else could we do it? Why aren't we doing it another way? And what haven't we thought about? It's a really interesting thing. I was just speaking to women's groups, and I normally speak to, all kinds of people all around the world. But this particular day, I looked up a lot of the top women in the world who were top CEOs. And what was fascinating to me, when they asked them what they thought was the top trait to being successful, the majority of them listed curiosity or getting out of status quo thinking as their top trait. So I urge you to look at what you do that's just status quo thinking, and consider, why are you doing it this way? How else could you be doing it? What other ways are there, and why aren't you? And consider the 4 factors of fate, F-A-T-E. How are they impacting your lives in terms of reducing your curiosity? And maybe just consider doing a personal kind of SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats, as it applies to these 4 factors of fear, assumptions, technology, and environment. And if you think about it that way, you can create little miniature goals to build your sense of, get away from that fear, to tell yourself that your voice is maybe holding you back, and maybe this is how next time you think that way, try something else. And try not to over or underutilize technology. Some days have high technology days, have low technology days on other days, to learn the foundations behind technology and to get, so you're not so overwhelmed. And then just recognize how much people in the past, from your teachers to your friends to your bosses, or everybody you've interacted with, how they've influenced maybe your interests. Maybe you would have liked something had you not just gone along with the crowd and stood up and sat down just because the bell was ringing. So just think about that and incorporate that in your daily life.
I feel like everybody is at a point where they're just trying to conform to everything that's happening around them. But then at the same time, they also want to stand out. And that's not really possible unless you listen to what your heart tells you. So I feel like that's an excellent point that you made there. So Dr. Diane, you're surely a very inspiring person. And your insights will definitely be cherished by all of us at peopleHum. And I'm sure that our listeners and viewers will share the same opinion. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. And this is such a great show you have. And I hope it helps a lot of people. All you're doing is really inspiring.
Thank you so much.